Friends, if you want to watch a unique, stylish, and slightly quirky movie like Miss Meadows, 2014 in English, then you must like this video. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because here you'll get all the latest updates, detailed movie explanations, behind-the-scenes insights, and fun facts about your favorite films from Hollywood and beyond. Today's video is going to be very exciting because we are going to talk about a film that's truly one of a kind. The movie we'll be discussing today is called Miss Meadows. It's not just another crime drama or mystery. It's a film that blends innocence with darkness, charm with danger, and offers a storyline that is as intriguing as it is entertaining. In this video, I'm going to give you complete information about Miss Meadows. We'll talk about what this film is all about, what makes it stand out from the crowd, and most importantly, where you can watch it. Whether you prefer streaming on OTT platforms or watching movies on satellite TV channels, I'll tell you exactly where Miss Meadows is currently available. So if you're looking for a film that's a little different from the usual thrillers and action-packed blockbusters, then this might just be your perfect weekend watch. But that's just the beginning. We're going to explore this film from every angle. First, we'll look at the technical side. How the film was shot, what kind of cinematography and editing style it uses, and how these elements help in creating the film's unique tone. Then we'll take a deep dive into the music department. Music plays a huge role in Miss Meadows, giving the film its charming yet unsettling vibe. We'll talk about the soundtrack, the background score, and how it all comes together to enhance the viewing experience. We'll also discuss the journey of the film from pre-production to post-production. What was the vision behind the movie? How did the filming process go? What were some of the challenges the filmmakers faced? And how did they overcome them? I'll share with you all the key details about the crew, the filming locations, the production schedule, and everything else that went into making this film a reality. We'll also touch upon the film's budget and compare it to its box office performance. Was it a financial success, a sleeper hit, or more of a cult favorite that gained appreciation over time? Now let's talk about the most important part, the story. Miss Meadows tells the story of a seemingly sweet and polite schoolteacher with a dark side. Played brilliantly by Katie Holmes, the title character walks around in vintage clothes, speaks like she's from another era, and carries a deadly secret in her purse. I'll give you a short review of the storyline, without revealing any major spoilers, just enough to get you hooked and curious about what happens next. We'll explore the film's tone, its themes, and how it manages to balance innocence with intense drama. Of course, we will also talk about the performances in the film. Katie Holmes delivers a performance that is both charming and chilling at the same time. We'll discuss her role in detail, how she prepared for such a unique character, and how she brings Miss Meadows to life on screen. We'll also take a look at the supporting cast, their characters, and how each of them contributes to the story. Who plays the love interest? Who are the antagonists? And how well did they perform in their respective roles? You'll find all that information right here. And finally, we'll explore some fun and interesting facts about the film that you might not know. How did the idea for this movie come about? What inspired the character of Miss Meadows? Were there any scenes that were improvised or changed during filming? These little behind-the-scenes stories make watching the movie even more fun and give you a better appreciation for the art of filmmaking. So friends, if you're someone who enjoys unique characters, creative storytelling, and films that leave you thinking even after they end, then this video is definitely for you. I request you to watch this video till the very end, because we're going to uncover a lot about Miss Meadows, from the story and cast to the music, direction, and everything in between. So, let's not waste any more time and dive straight into the world of Miss Meadows. Let's get started. Alright friends, now let's talk about the most fascinating part of Miss Meadows, the plot and the way this quirky, quietly intense story unfolds. Right from the very first scene, the film sets a tone that makes you raise an eyebrow and lean in with curiosity. Picture this. A young woman dressed in vintage outfits, gloves on her hands, tap-dancing her way through a quiet suburban neighborhood like she stepped out of a 1950s musical. That's our main character, Miss Meadows. She's polite, she's sweet, she quotes poetry, she corrects people's manners. And oh, she carries a tiny pistol in her purse and doesn't hesitate to use it when evil crosses her path. Yes, you heard that right. The story starts off in what feels like a picture-perfect American town. There are picket fences, front porches, friendly neighbors, and Miss Meadows fits in like a porcelain doll placed delicately on a shelf. But this is where the film begins playing with contrasts. That sugary sweet exterior. Just a layer. Beneath it lies something much darker. Miss Meadows is not just a schoolteacher with impeccable manners. She's a vigilante, taking justice into her own hands whenever society fails to act. And the movie doesn't spell this out in bold letters. It lets it unravel slowly, almost teasingly, giving the audience little shocks wrapped in dainty bows. There's something really interesting about how the story handles time and perspective. It doesn't jump timelines or confuse you with flashbacks, but it plays with perception. We see everything from Miss Meadows' point of view, but her perspective is, let's just say, unique. She filters the world through idealism and innocence, almost like a child who refuses to see how broken things really are. So when she pulls out a gun and takes down a criminal without blinking, it's not framed with high drama or action movie theatrics. It happens quietly, only, like someone watering plants. And that's where the tension lives, in the gap between how she sees herself and how the world sees her. Then comes the romance. Enter the sheriff, a local lawman who's drawn to Miss Meadows, even as he starts to suspect that there's more to her than tea and tap shoes. Their relationship is awkwardly adorable at first. It's like watching two vintage dolls trying to date. But then the tension starts to build. Can he trust her? Should he arrest her? Can love bloom when one of you might be a cold-blooded killer? These questions become the emotional core of the movie. The turning points in the story aren't big, explosive moments. They're small, strange beats that change the rhythm. A phone call from her mother who isn't really there. A playground conversation with a child that feels more like a therapy session. A murder that doesn't seem to shake her at all. Slowly, layer by layer, we start to question everything. Is she protecting innocence? Or is she just broken in a very polished, polite way? There's one particularly eerie moment, without spoiling anything, when Miss Meadows has to face the consequences of her actions in a way that threatens her identity. She's forced to consider whether the person she believes herself to be is really who she is. The movie doesn't give easy answers. It lets us sit in the discomfort. And that's what makes it so compelling. By the time we reach the final act, the conflict is less about good versus evil and more about perception versus reality. Can someone be both a hero and a threat? Can morality exist in extremes? The movie asks these questions without ever breaking its straight-faced delivery. It stays bizarrely calm even as everything threatens to collapse, and that calmness makes the tension even more intense. So, if you were expecting a conventional hero's journey with dramatic music and predictable twists, think again. Miss Meadows walks to the beat of her own tap shoes, literally and narratively. It's weird, it's dark, it's unexpectedly funny, and it dares to tell its story without screaming for attention. It doesn't follow the typical formula, and that's exactly why it sticks in your mind long after it ends. Now let's dive into the wonderfully strange world of the characters in Miss Meadows, starting with the most fascinating one of all, Miss Meadows herself. She's like a walking contradiction wrapped in floral dresses and lace gloves. At first glance, she looks like a throwback from another century. Prim, proper, with the manners of a 1950s etiquette teacher. She says things like golly gee and toodles. She reads poetry aloud to birds, and she tap dances down sidewalks as if her life were a stage musical. But then, bam! She pulls out a tiny pistol from her purse and shoots a man dead for being a danger to society. It's that tension between charm and violence, innocence and brutality, that makes her such a layered, unpredictable character. Miss Meadows isn't your typical lead. She doesn't grow in the usual way characters do in movies. She doesn't learn a lesson, she doesn't change her ways dramatically. Instead, her arc is about peeling back the layers to reveal why she is the way she is. Her development is more about discovery than transformation. With every quiet, smiling stare and softly spoken line, we start to question what's real and what's part of the carefully constructed fantasy she's living in. Her conversations with her mother, who we only hear over the phone, give us haunting glimpses into her trauma and her detachment from reality. These phone calls are like a thread that runs through the movie, and as we begin to understand what's really going on there, Miss Meadows becomes even more intriguing and unsettling. Now, let's talk about the sheriff, the man who becomes both her love interest and her moral mirror. He's the classic small-town lawman, kind-hearted, a little lonely, and definitely thrown off by Miss Meadows' old-fashioned ways. First, he's charmed. Who wouldn't be? She's polite, beautiful, and speaks like a character from a Jane Austen novel. But as he starts to sense that something's not quite right, his internal conflict starts to take shape. Is he falling for her, or is he investigating her? And can he do both at the same time without compromising his values? His character arc is subtle but significant. He begins as someone who believes in rules and order, and ends up confronting the gray areas of morality because of her. Their relationship is like watching a tea party slowly turn into a psychological chess match. The sheriff wants to believe in the version of Miss Meadows that she presents to the world, but the cracks begin to show. And instead of confronting her directly, he gently tries to guide her toward honesty. It's a strange kind of romance, part love story, part ethical standoff, and it adds a whole new layer to both characters. Then there are the townspeople, the children she teaches, the parents, the neighbors, all of whom seem to live in this carefully curated world where everything looks just right on the surface. But as Miss Meadows continues her secret crusade, that surface starts to splinter. What's brilliant is how the secondary characters reflect the film's themes. The children see Miss Meadows as a kind, nurturing figure, while the adults start to suspect that something's off. The community doesn't develop in the way you'd expect. They don't become heroes or villains. They just keep trying to maintain normalcy while something very abnormal walks among them in high heels. Even the villains in this story, the men Miss Meadows targets, aren't cartoonish. They're frighteningly real, and the film presents them as genuine threats to society. And yet, we're never entirely sure whether Miss Meadows' actions are justice or delusion. Her victims don't get redemption arcs, but they do serve to highlight how far she's willing to go in her role as self-appointed guardian angel. The most fascinating thing about all these characters is how they orbit around Miss Meadows' strange little world. None of them feel like filler. Each interaction adds something to the mystery, whether it's deepening the illusion or poking holes in it. Relationships aren't just about connection, they're about reflection. Who sees the real Miss Meadows? Who chooses to ignore it? And who gets caught in the crossfire of her fairy tale gone wrong? So, while you might expect a story like this to show dramatic growth or redemption, what Miss Meadows gives you instead is something more nuanced. It gives you characters who reveal themselves slowly, like peeling the petals off a flower that looks beautiful but might be poisonous underneath. It's an odd dance between appearance and reality, fantasy and violence, and every character, whether central or background, plays a role in that choreography. Let's talk about the performances in Miss Meadows, because this film wouldn't be half as fascinating without the actors who make these quirky, quietly intense characters feel so real, and so strange. Right at the center of it all is Katie Holmes, and let's be honest, this might just be the most unexpected role she's ever taken on. She steps into the shoes of Miss Meadows like she was born to tap dance through danger. Her performance is a mix of sugar, steel, and something slightly unhinged, like Mary Poppins with a dark secret. Holmes doesn't just act the part, she fully disappears into it. From the way she holds her posture to the dreamy, distant way she speaks, she nails that offbeat charm. And it's not just surface-level quirkiness. There's something going on behind her eyes, a quiet tension that tells you everything you need to know. You believe that she believes she's doing the right thing, and that's what makes it so chilling. She delivers her lines with such delicate precision, like every sentence is part of a script she wrote for her perfect little world. And then, without warning, she'll turn deadly serious, pull out her pistol, end a threat, and go right back to reciting poetry as if nothing happened. The balance Holmes strikes between innocence and menace is razor-sharp. She doesn't play Miss Meadows as crazy. She plays her as committed. Committed to her cause, her vision, her fairy tale version of justice. And it's that sincerity that makes her both captivating and a little terrifying. Opposite her, we have James Badge Dale as the sheriff, and he's the perfect counterweight to Holmes' eccentricity. His performance is more grounded, more internal, and that's exactly what the film needs. He's the audience's anchor, the one character who seems to exist in reality, while everyone else dances around the edges of fantasy. He brings a quiet intensity to the role, never overplaying the suspicion or the romance. Instead, he lets it simmer. You can see the conflict in his eyes as he tries to balance his affection for Miss Meadows with his growing doubts. It's not a flashy performance, but it's deeply effective. He makes you feel the weight of his choices. Their chemistry is weirdly charming. Not your typical rom-com energy, not even your standard thriller tension. It's more like watching two very different people try to speak the same emotional language without either of them really understanding the other. Holmes floats, Dale grounds, and together they create this strange little bubble where you're never sure what's going to happen next. The supporting cast might not get as much screen time, but they all play their parts with just the right amount of oddness. The children in Miss Meadows' class are adorable in that unsettling way that only child actors in a dark comedy can be. They worship her, mimic her manners, and treat her like a fairy tale come to life. Their performances add to the eerie charm of the film. They're not doing much, but their stillness and wide-eyed reactions are perfect for the tone. Even the background characters, the nosy neighbors, the concerned parents, the men who cross Miss Meadows' path, are played just enough off-center to make the whole world feel slightly dreamlike. No one overacts. Everyone feels like they've stepped out of a storybook that's been left out in the rain and started to warp around the edges. And we have to mention the voice on the phone, Miss Meadows' mother. It's just a voice, but it carries so much weight. The line delivery is soft and loving, but there's something off about it, and the actress behind that voice walks a fine line between comforting and creepy. As the truth about those phone calls starts to unfold, you realize just how important that voice performance really is to understanding Miss Meadows' entire character. Every actor in this film seems to understand the assignment. Stay calm, stay subtle, and let the weirdness simmer. No one's chewing the scenery. They're all playing it straight in a world that's quietly twisted, and that's what gives the movie its unique flavor. The performances don't scream for attention. They lure you in, tap dancing gently over the line between delightful and disturbing. Now let's talk about the magic, or should we say the mystery, behind the camera, because Miss Meadows doesn't just work because of the acting or the story. It works because of the strange and deliberate vision brought to life by writer-director Karen Leigh Hopkins. She doesn't just direct this film, she sculpts it like a porcelain figurine with a hidden blade inside. From the very first scene, you can feel that she's carefully controlling the tone, balancing between whimsical charm and unnerving darkness without ever letting one side tip too far. The entire movie feels like a fairy tale that got lost and wandered into the real world, and Hopkins leans into that with everything she's got. Let's talk about tone first, because that's where the direction really stands out. Most directors would choose a lane, either a sunny small-town drama or a psychological thriller. But not here. Hopkins swirls them together like two scoops of totally different ice cream flavors and somehow makes it work. One moment, you're admiring the quaint front porches and pastel outfits. The next, someone's getting shot in cold blood, and the film treats both with the same calm, deliberate mood. That contrast is where the magic happens. Hopkins doesn't treat violence with gritty realism. She stages it with quiet formality. It doesn't explode. It lands with a soft tap like Miss Meadows' shoes. That strange tonal consistency makes the story feel like it's happening in a dream, or maybe a nightmare hiding behind polite smiles. Then there's the pacing. Miss Meadows isn't a rush-through-the-plot kind of movie. It takes its time like its lead character, strolling instead of sprinting. And that's intentional. Hopkins wants you to settle into the weirdness, to live in the discomfort. Every moment, no matter how small, feels carefully chosen. Conversations stretch just long enough to make you uneasy. Silences linger. Scenes don't build to big climaxes, they just exist in this delicate tension. And what's fascinating is how that slow pacing actually builds suspense. You're waiting for something to snap, and the longer it doesn't, the more on edge you feel. The shot composition adds even more flavor to this already odd recipe. Hopkins frames Miss Meadows in ways that make her look like a doll in a diorama, Everything is symmetrical, pastel, neat. She often places her dead center in the shot, surrounded by quiet suburban beauty, as if she's the centerpiece of a well-arranged tea party. And then, with almost no warning, that pretty image is disrupted by something violent or uncomfortable. There's one particular trick that Hopkins uses a lot, showing beauty first, then letting the darkness creep in. A close-up of a flower, followed by a gun. A child's drawing, then a headline about a crime. That visual rhythm keeps the viewer alert, never quite at ease. Stylistically, Hopkins leans hard into contrast. The sound design plays into this too. Cheerful birds chirping while something terrible is about to happen. Light, plinky music in the background as Miss Meadows prepares to confront a criminal. It's like someone added a laugh track to a horror movie. But instead of breaking the tension, it adds to it. You're constantly being pulled in two directions, and that push-pull effect is a direct result of Hopkins' precise choices behind the scenes. Another brilliant element is how the direction handles perspective. Everything is filtered through Miss Meadows' eyes, and Hopkins is careful to let us stay in her fantasy just long enough before reality starts to leak through. We see the world as she wants it to be. Old-fashioned, sweet, full of manners and morals. But Hopkins doesn't let us get too comfortable in that world. She nudges us, through strange edits, oddly timed reactions, and those eerie phone calls with her mother, reminding us that something isn't right. It's not until the film's later moments that we fully realize how deeply Miss Meadows has retreated into her own head. And when that realization lands, it hits hard. Even the choice of setting is a stroke of quiet brilliance. The town is almost too perfect, too quiet, too clean. Hopkins turns suburbia into something surreal, like a movie set that might collapse if you push too hard on the walls. That setting becomes a character of its own, reflecting Miss Meadows' carefully curated world and highlighting how fragile that world truly is. What makes the direction so effective is that it never shouts. It whispers, nudges, suggests. Hopkins doesn't throw plot twists at the audience or force emotion. She lets things unfold naturally, knowing that the strangeness will keep us hooked. She trusts the audience to notice the cracks in the porcelain, and she never rushes to explain them. It's a rare thing for a movie to feel this quiet and yet this full of tension. That's the director's signature here. Karen Leigh Hopkins isn't trying to make you jump out of your seat. She's trying to make you feel slightly off balance, like you're walking through a garden and suddenly realize the flowers are made of paper and the birds are watching you too closely. That kind of mood doesn't happen by accident. Takes vision and a very steady hand behind the camera. Let's get into the visual feast that is the cinematography of Miss Meadows, because the way this movie looks is almost like a character all on its own, quietly shaping how you feel about every scene, every moment, every tiny detail. The cinematographer, Michel Stamartin, does a masterful job of using camera angles, lighting, and framing not just to tell the story, but to immerse you in the peculiar, unsettling world Miss Meadows inhabits. Right from the start, the film's look pulls you in with its crisp, pastel-toned palette. The lighting is soft and warm, almost like a perpetual golden hour that refuses to fade. It's the kind of light you'd expect in a nostalgic memory or a vintage postcard from a perfect little town. But here's the twist. That pretty glowing light casts long shadows, creating an undercurrent of unease. It's like the cinematography is playing a trick on you, inviting you in with warmth, then hinting that something sinister lurks just beyond the edges of the frame. The bright colors and cozy lighting clash with the dark themes, making every scene feel like a beautifully wrapped present hiding something sharp inside. Camera angles play a huge role in this push-pull dynamic between innocence and menace. There are a lot of perfectly symmetrical shots, where Miss Meadows is placed dead center in the frame, sometimes so rigid and composed it looks like she's frozen in a snow globe. These shots reinforce her controlled, orderly world, her desire for everything to be neat and polite. But then the camera will shift to a low angle or a slightly tilted frame, subtly throwing off the balance and reminding you that not everything is as tidy as it seems. These angles sneakily build tension without you even noticing at first. Framing is used with an almost surgical precision throughout the film. Characters are often isolated in the frame, standing alone against wide, empty backgrounds or framed by doorways and windows like they're trapped in their own worlds. This isolation visually communicates the emotional distance and loneliness beneath the surface. When Miss Meadows is shown in her classroom or walking down a street, the empty space around her feels less like freedom and more like a cage. It's a powerful way to make you feel the quiet desperation that simmers beneath her polite smile. Some of the most striking visuals come in moments where beauty and violence collide. For example, there are scenes where the camera lingers on something delicate, like a bouquet of flowers or a child's drawing, then cuts sharply to a hand holding a gun or a shattered glass. These juxtapositions are framed with elegance, almost like still-life paintings with a dark twist. The cinematography doesn't rush past these moments. It lets you soak in the contrast, heightening the surreal, dreamlike atmosphere. One of the coolest visual tricks in the film is how reflections and shadows are used. Mirrors, windows, and shiny surfaces pop up frequently, and the camera loves to catch Miss Meadows' reflection, sometimes distorted or fragmented. It's like the cinematography is constantly reminding us that her identity isn't straightforward. It's fractured, layered, maybe even hiding secrets. Shadows stretch across walls or creep along floors just a bit too long, creating an invisible presence that adds to the creeping tension. The use of close-ups is another highlight. The camera loves to zoom in on tiny details, the twitch of a lip, the flutter of an eyelid, the clasp of a gloved hand. These moments draw you deeper into Miss Meadows' world, forcing you to notice what she notices, or what she's desperately trying to hide. When Holmes delivers her lines, the camera often stays close, capturing every subtle emotion that flickers across her face, making you feel like you're right there inside her head. And let's not forget the film's quiet, almost hypnotic tracking shots. There's something mesmerizing about watching Miss Meadows glide through her neighborhood, the camera following her at a steady pace, showing the mundane surroundings in slow, careful detail. It's like being on a gentle, eerie stroll through a world that's both familiar and unnervingly strange. These moments give you time to absorb the atmosphere, to feel the slow-building tension as you realize this calm is fragile. Overall, the cinematography of Miss Meadows isn't about flashy camera moves or big visual effects. It's subtle, meticulous, and incredibly intentional. Every shot is crafted to pull you deeper into the strange, beautiful, and unsettling world of the film. The lighting makes you feel warm but watchful, the framing makes you feel close but isolated, and the angles keep you just off balance enough to never feel completely comfortable. It's like the camera is tapping its foot alongside Miss Meadows, polite, precise, but always ready to spring into action. Let's talk about the editing and pacing of Miss Meadows, because this is one of those films where the rhythm really sets the entire mood and keeps you hooked in a way that's almost hypnotic. The editing isn't flashy or frenetic. It's more like a slow dance, carefully measured, with every cut feeling like a deliberate step rather than a random move. The flow of the movie is smooth, but not in a way that lets you relax completely. Instead, the editing creates a subtle push and pull that keeps you slightly on edge, always wondering when the next twist in the rhythm will come. Right from the opening scenes, the editing establishes this odd balance between calm and tension. Cuts happen in a way that lets moments breathe. You don't get rushed through scenes or slammed into quick montages. Instead, the film lingers on details, like Katie Holmes' gentle smile or a child's curious glance, allowing the viewer to soak in the atmosphere. But then, just when you start to feel comfortable with the pace, a sudden cut or a quick transition jolts you. It's like the editing is playing a game, teasing you with moments of tranquility only to yank you back into the eerie reality of Miss Meadows' world. Transitions between scenes are often seamless, almost poetic. There's this neat little trick where the film fades between two very different moods or settings, like shifting from a bright classroom to a dark alley, without any harsh breaks. This keeps the story flowing smoothly, but also reminds you that Miss Meadows' life is a strange blend of innocence and danger, sweetness and violence. The editing reinforces that duality by making the shifts feel natural yet unexpected. Pacing-wise, the film doesn't rush to deliver answers or big reveals. Instead, it paces itself like a stroll through a quiet neighborhood, measured, deliberate, with an undercurrent of something brewing beneath the surface. The slow build lets the tension simmer, and by the time key moments arrive, they hit with a real impact. The editing knows when to hold a shot just a little longer, drawing out the suspense, and when to cut quickly to shake things up. It's a dance of patience and surprise. Interestingly, the editing also plays with the idea of time in subtle ways. While the narrative follows a pretty linear path, there are moments where flashbacks or phone conversations are edited in to slowly unravel Miss Meadows' backstory and mental state. These inserts never feel abrupt or out of place. They're woven gently into the flow, giving you just enough context without breaking the spell. It's like piecing together a puzzle, but the pieces come to you softly, one by one. Another cool aspect is how the editing handles moments of violence. Instead of graphic, quick cuts that shock, these scenes are edited with quiet precision. The shots linger a bit, giving you a clear view but never lingering too long. This restrained approach makes the violence more unsettling because it's so calm and matter-of-fact. It's like watching a character perform a ritual, and the editing mirrors that eerie calmness perfectly. The rhythm of the film as a whole, its rise and fall in energy, is orchestrated through editing choices that are subtle but powerful. There are no big action set pieces or frantic chases, so the film depends on editing to maintain emotional engagement. By carefully balancing longer reflective scenes with shorter tense moments, the editing keeps the viewer invested in both the character's inner world and the unfolding mystery. So, while Miss Meadows might feel slow to some, that's exactly the point. The editing invites you to enter a world where time seems to stretch and contract based on emotion and mood, not just plot. It's like being wrapped in a slow, suspenseful waltz, sometimes graceful, sometimes unpredictable, but always captivating. The flow never feels disjointed or rushed. It flows just right to make the story's quiet darkness linger in your mind long after the credits roll. Diving into Miss Meadows, you quickly realize this movie isn't just about a sweet schoolteacher with a secret. It's actually juggling some pretty deep and provocative themes that sneak up on you like a shadow in the sunshine. The film wraps itself in a deceptively charming package, but beneath that polished surface, it's asking questions about justice, morality, and the blurry lines that separate right from wrong. It's like it's daring you to decide where you stand while keeping a polite smile on its face. One of the biggest ideas the film explores is the concept of vigilante justice, but not in the typical bang-bang shoot-'em-up style. Miss Meadows doesn't run around wearing a mask or shouting slogans. She's quiet, polite, almost innocent in her approach, yet deadly serious about delivering her own brand of justice. This raises some fascinating questions. What happens when someone takes the law into their own hands because they believe the system has failed? Is Miss Meadows a hero, a monster, or something in between? The movie doesn't force you to pick a side, and that ambiguity makes it a lot more interesting. It leaves you pondering how thin the line can be between protector and predator. The theme of isolation and loneliness is woven tightly into the story as well. Miss Meadows is a character who lives in a bubble of her own making, polite, controlled, and detached from the messy realities around her. The film uses this to explore how loneliness can distort perception, how the need for control can lead someone down a dark path, and how the masks we wear to fit in can sometimes trap us inside. The way she interacts with her students, the town, and even the mysterious phone calls from her mother highlights her emotional distance and the fragile walls she's built around herself. It's a subtle, haunting exploration of what happens when a person tries to rewrite their own narrative to avoid pain. There's also an underlying commentary on small-town life and the facades people maintain. The town in Miss Meadows looks picture-perfect on the surface, but the cinematography and narrative hint at secrets, unspoken fears, and hidden darkness lurking just beneath the neat lawns and polite smiles. The film uses this backdrop to examine how communities deal with trauma and violence, whether by ignoring it, sanitizing it, or pretending it doesn't exist. It's a quiet critique of the way people sometimes choose comfort over confronting uncomfortable truths. Another compelling theme is about childhood and innocence, but in a twisted, complicated way. Miss Meadows' classroom scenes with the children are filled with sweetness and light, but there's a persistent undercurrent of something off. The film seems to ask, what does innocence really mean? Can it be preserved in a world that's inherently violent? Or is innocence just another illusion we cling to? The children's adoration of Miss Meadows contrasts sharply with her darker actions, creating an unsettling tension that makes you think about how we shield young minds from harsh realities, and what happens when that shield cracks. The motif of duality runs throughout the film like a quiet heartbeat. Miss Meadows herself embodies this perfectly. She's at once a nurturing teacher and a cold executioner, a beacon of kindness and a shadow of death. This duality asks us to consider how people can contain contradictions, how morality isn't always black and white, and how sometimes the most dangerous things come wrapped in the sweetest packages. It's a theme that makes the film linger in your mind, because it's not easy to unpack, and it challenges simplistic views of good versus evil. Finally, there's the mysterious relationship with Miss Meadows' mother, communicated through those eerie phone calls. This adds a psychological layer to the story, hinting at themes of trauma, control, and the power of the past to shape the present. It's like the film is nudging you to look beyond the surface and question what's real and what's imagined in Miss Meadows' world. This element deepens the thematic complexity, giving the story a haunting emotional core. All these themes aren't just slapped on, they're woven into the fabric of the story in a way that feels natural and thought-provoking. The film trusts its audience to catch the nuances and wrestle with the ideas rather than spoon-feeding answers. So while you're watching Miss Meadows glide through her carefully ordered life, you're also invited to think about justice, identity, innocence, and the shadows lurking behind the curtains of everyday life, all wrapped up in a package that's as unsettling as it is charming. Let's dive into the world of sound in Miss Meadows, because music and sound design here aren't just background noise. They're key players in crafting the film's unique atmosphere and emotional texture. The soundtrack and score work together like a quiet, subtle dance partner, guiding you through the story with grace, tension, and just the right amount of unease. Right away, the music sets the tone by blending gentle, almost lullaby-like melodies with eerie undertones. It's like someone took a sweet children's tune and played it slightly off-key, making it both comforting and unsettling at the same time. This duality in the score perfectly mirrors Miss Meadows herself, polite and sweet on the surface, but hiding something darker underneath. The composer doesn't hit you over the head with heavy, dramatic music. Instead, the score tiptoes around the scenes, enhancing emotions without overwhelming them. One of the coolest things about the soundtrack is how it uses recurring motifs. Small musical ideas that pop up again and again, almost like little musical signatures for certain feelings or characters. These motifs work like a whisper in your ear, reminding you of the deeper layers in the story even when nothing dramatic is happening on screen. For example, a delicate piano phrase might appear when Miss Meadows is interacting with the children, creating a feeling of innocence and calm, only to morph slightly later into something more tense when the plot darkens. This clever use of recurring themes keeps the emotional narrative tied together and adds a sense of cohesion that's really satisfying. Silence, or near silence, is just as important as the music itself in Miss Meadows. There are moments where the film strips away all sound except the faintest ambient noises, the rustle of leaves, footsteps on pavement, the quiet ticking of a clock. These almost silent stretches build suspense in a way that music sometimes can't. It's as if the movie is holding its breath, and you're right there with it, waiting for something to break the stillness. When sound does return, it hits harder, whether it's a sudden note on the piano or a soft but chilling vocal cue. The sound design around dialogue also plays a subtle but effective role. Miss Meadows' voice often feels calm, measured, and even soothing, which contrasts beautifully with the soundtrack's uneasy undertones. This contrast between what you hear from her and what you feel from the music adds another layer to her character and keeps the audience engaged on a deeper level. It's like the soundscape is constantly whispering, "There's more to this than meets the ear." Another interesting aspect is how the score reacts to the film's shifting moods. When the story is light and sweet, the music sways gently with a whimsical charm, but as the tension builds, the instruments take on a sharper edge. Strings become more dissonant, percussion grows quieter but more insistent. This ebb and flow mirror the narrative's rise and fall, drawing you in emotionally without ever stealing the spotlight. What makes the soundtrack truly special is its restraint. Instead of overpowering the scenes with loud, dramatic cues, the music supports and enhances the storytelling with subtlety and finesse. It respects the film's slow, deliberate pace and lets silence and sound work hand in hand to create an atmosphere that's both soothing and suspenseful. You might find yourself noticing little details in the music only after the film ends, realizing how much it shaped your experience without you even realizing it in the moment. In the end, the soundtrack and score of Miss Meadows are like a secret language, communicating the film's emotional undercurrents and thematic tensions without saying a word. They guide you gently through the story's twists and turns, making you feel everything from comfort to unease with just a few notes or a sudden hush. It's a perfect example of how music and sound can elevate a film from simple storytelling to an immersive emotional journey. When it comes to Miss Meadows, the visual effects and CGI don't scream for attention. In fact, they work in a quiet, almost invisible way that serves the story without ever stealing the spotlight. This film isn't about flashy explosions or jaw-dropping digital wizardry. Instead, its effects are subtle, carefully crafted tools that blend seamlessly into the movie's atmosphere, enhancing the immersive experience rather than distracting from it. The practical effects in Miss Meadows shine particularly bright, even though they often go unnoticed because they feel so natural. Whether it's a well-placed prop, a clever makeup effect, or a physical stunt, the practical touches ground the film in reality. For instance, scenes involving injuries or the aftermath of violence rely on makeup and practical effects that are realistic but not over the top. These small, tangible details make the darker moments feel more immediate and believable, pulling you into the film's unsettling mood without feeling artificial or exaggerated. When CGI does appear, it's used sparingly and with great care. Rather than showcasing flashy visual tricks, the digital effects are almost invisible, quietly filling in gaps or enhancing certain shots without calling attention to themselves. Think of it as the kind of digital magic that helps with seamless transitions, subtle enhancements of environments, or softening of edges, rather than turning the film into a spectacle of digital fireworks. This restrained use of CGI fits perfectly with the movie's tone, keeping the focus on story and character rather than spectacle. One of the clever ways the film uses visual effects is to subtly support the psychological and eerie elements of the story. For example, when certain scenes hint at Miss Meadows' fractured mental state or the surreal nature of her world, slight distortions or shifts in lighting and background details, often aided by digital effects, add to the dreamlike quality without overwhelming the viewer. These touches are like little visual whispers, enhancing the feeling that something isn't quite right beneath the polished surface. The balance between practical and digital effects here is spot on. The filmmakers clearly understand that less is more, using practical effects to anchor the story in reality and digital effects to gently push the boundaries of that reality just enough to keep you intrigued. This combination makes the film's darker moments feel visceral and authentic, while still allowing for a touch of cinematic surrealism. Overall, the visual effects and CGI in Miss Meadows are masters of disguise. They do their job quietly, supporting the mood and storytelling without ever demanding attention. They blend so naturally with the film's world that you barely notice them, which is exactly the kind of magic this film needs to maintain its eerie, unsettling charm. It's a reminder that sometimes the best effects are the ones you don't see coming. The set design and locations in Miss Meadows work like silent storytellers, weaving atmosphere and meaning into every scene without ever drawing too much attention to themselves. From the moment the camera glides over the town, you get the sense that this isn't just any ordinary small town. It's a carefully constructed world where every detail has been chosen to support the film's themes and tone. The production design team clearly understood that in a movie like this, the environment isn't just a backdrop. It's an emotional landscape that mirrors the characters' inner lives, especially Miss Meadows herself. Let's start with the town itself. At first glance, it's your quintessential suburban paradise. Perfectly manicured lawns, tidy sidewalks, charming houses with white picket fences, and tree-lined streets that look straight out of a postcard. This wholesome, almost idyllic setting creates a strong sense of normalcy and calm. But the brilliance lies in how this perfection is almost too perfect, like a fragile glass dome protecting a world full of secrets and hidden cracks. The production design uses clean lines, soft pastel colors, and traditional architecture to lull you into comfort, making the film's darker moments feel all the more unsettling. The town feels like it's playing a part in a carefully rehearsed play, where everyone keeps up appearances no matter what lies beneath. Moving inside the classrooms where Miss Meadows works her day job, the set design takes on a warm, inviting tone. Bright walls decorated with colorful educational posters, carefully arranged desks, and shelves filled with crafts and books. It's a space that screams safe haven for children, but on closer inspection, there's a subtle tension in the orderliness. Everything is placed just so, too neat and deliberate, almost as if Miss Meadows herself has arranged it to maintain control. This meticulousness hints at her personality, the desire to impose order and calm in a world that feels chaotic underneath. The classroom, while cheerful on the surface, becomes a quiet battleground between innocence and the darker truths the film explores. Outside of the classroom, the various locations used in the film add texture and depth to the story. The quiet streets, local parks, and isolated spots where pivotal scenes unfold contribute to an atmosphere that's at once serene and haunting. The cinematography highlights the muted colors of dusk and dawn, long shadows creeping across empty benches or abandoned playgrounds, reinforcing a feeling of loneliness and unease. These spaces feel frozen in time, echoing Miss Meadows' own stasis. Her life is carefully controlled, yet something is simmering just beneath the surface. The locations feel lived in but also strangely still, as if the town itself holds its breath in anticipation. Props and small details play a surprisingly large role in grounding the film's world. Take the vintage-style telephone Miss Meadows uses for her mysterious phone calls, an object that looks out of place in the modern world and instantly adds a layer of mystery and nostalgia. Personal items in her home, like old-fashioned furniture and carefully chosen decor, hint at a character clinging to tradition and control. These tangible details not only make the setting believable but also act as subtle extensions of Miss Meadows' personality and inner world. The production design strikes a delicate balance between realism and stylization. Nothing feels overly theatrical or artificial, but there is a polished, almost storybook quality to the visuals that enhances the film's unsettling charm. The town, the homes, the classroom, they're all believable yet just a little too neat, too perfect, suggesting that beneath this veneer lies something much more complex and shadowy. This balance keeps the audience on edge, constantly questioning what's real and what's facade. Moreover, the way the film uses space and setting to reflect emotional states is masterful. For example, scenes where Miss Meadows is alone often feature wide, empty spaces or tightly controlled, clutter-free rooms, visually representing her isolation and control issues. In contrast, scenes involving conflict or emotional release might take place in more chaotic or shadowy environments, heightening the sense of tension. All in all, the set design and locations in Miss Meadows don't just create a believable world, they create an emotional one. They invite you to step inside a place that looks charming and familiar but is layered with mystery and unease, perfectly mirroring the film's exploration of innocence, control, and hidden darkness. The attention to detail and thoughtful design choices make the environment feel like an active participant in the story, helping to immerse the viewer in a world where nothing is quite what it seems. The dialogue and script in Miss Meadows walk a fascinating tightrope between sweet innocence and sharp, unsettling undercurrents, making every line feel loaded with more meaning than it might seem at first glance. The writing doesn't just move the story forward, it adds layers of personality and mood that pull you deeper into this strange, almost fairy tale world that's anything but ordinary. One of the most striking things about the script is how natural and believable the dialogue feels, especially in the classroom scenes. When Miss Meadows is interacting with her students, the exchanges have a gentle warmth and simplicity that really sell her role as a caring, if somewhat unconventional, teacher. The kids' lines feel authentic and unforced, full of the kind of innocent curiosity and blunt honesty you'd expect from children. This makes those moments all the more effective because they contrast so sharply with the darker tones lurking beneath the surface of the story. Then you have Miss Meadows herself, whose lines are a study in contradictions. On the surface, she speaks with politeness and a calm, almost old-fashioned manner, often using formal, precise language that reflects her controlled personality. But there's always a hint of something more beneath her words, a subtle sharpness, a quiet menace that sneaks into her tone if you listen carefully. The script cleverly uses this duality to keep the audience guessing about her true nature, balancing the sweet teacher persona with flashes of icy resolve and unexpected darkness. The script doesn't shy away from moments of sharp wit either. Some of the exchanges, especially when tensions rise or when characters confront each other, crackle with a dry, understated humor that breaks the tension just enough to keep things engaging. These moments feel organic rather than forced, providing a nice rhythm to the film's pacing and reminding viewers that even in a story with heavy themes, there's room for clever, nuanced writing. Emotional weight is another strong suit of the dialogue. Certain scenes feature exchanges that feel quietly powerful, packed with subtext and unspoken feelings. The script excels at showing rather than telling. Characters often reveal their inner struggles through what they don't say, the pauses between words, or a carefully chosen phrase that hints at deeper pain or conflict. This subtlety makes the emotional beats feel earned and authentic, rather than melodramatic or overdone. There are definitely standout lines that linger long after the scene ends, phrases that encapsulate key themes or moments in the film. These lines don't just serve the plot, they give insight into the characters' psyches or under the story's moral ambiguities. Some lines feel like little riddles or whispered secrets, inviting the audience to read between the lines and engage more deeply with the narrative. Overall, the dialogue and script of Miss Meadows manage to be engaging, natural, and memorable without ever becoming heavy-handed or cliché. They enrich the characters and story, creating a world where words carry weight and meaning, often with a twist beneath the surface. The writing keeps you hooked not just through what is said, but through what's left unsaid, making every conversation feel like a puzzle piece in the bigger picture. Miss Meadows plays with its genre in a way that keeps you guessing, twisting the familiar and bending expectations just enough to feel fresh and unpredictable. At first glance, it might seem like a straightforward thriller with a dash of drama, a story about a sweet, innocent schoolteacher with a secret. But as the film unfolds, it cleverly subverts those expectations, mixing elements of psychological thriller, dark comedy, and even a bit of noir to create a tone all its own. One of the most interesting things about the genre execution here is how the film toys with the idea of the perfect suburban life trope, only to turn it on its head. Instead of the usual comforting, safe small-town setting, Miss Meadows layers on a thick coat of unease and ambiguity. The film leans into the classic thriller elements, the mysterious protagonist, the lurking danger, the moral questions, but it never feels like it's checking off boxes or following a formula. There's a slow-burning suspense that sneaks up on you rather than screaming for attention with loud music and jump scares. Rather than focusing heavily on action, the film balances tension and drama with quiet moments that feel just as charged. The suspense isn't about frantic chases or big set pieces. It's about the psychological tug-of-war between appearances and reality, good and evil, control and chaos. This gives the movie a more cerebral edge, encouraging viewers to pay attention to small details and character interactions rather than relying on obvious thrills. Humor sneaks in where you might least expect it, mostly through subtle, dry wit embedded in the script and character interactions. It's never slapstick or broad, but rather a quiet, almost dark humor that adds a layer of complexity to the tone. This humor helps keep the film from becoming too heavy or dour, giving it a bit of personality and charm that contrasts with the darker themes. The drama in Miss Meadows is intimate and character-driven, focusing on the inner struggles of its protagonist and those around her. It's not about large-scale conflicts but about personal battles and moral ambiguity. This focus adds emotional weight and makes the film feel grounded even when it explores darker psychological territory. The film's pacing also reflects its genre blending. It takes its time building tension and atmosphere, with moments that invite you to slow down and think rather than rushing through plot points. This patience pays off by creating a mood that's immersive and unsettling, rather than just exciting in a conventional way. While the movie dips into some familiar genre motifs, like the vigilante with a strict moral code or the double life of a seemingly normal person, it uses these clichés as starting points to explore more complex questions. It's less about predictable plot twists and more about examining character and theme through a genre lens that feels both familiar and fresh. All in all, Miss Meadows is a film that knows the rules of its genre but isn't afraid to play with them, mixing suspense, drama, and subtle humor in ways that keep you intrigued. It's like a recipe where the ingredients are classic but the chef adds unexpected spices, resulting in a dish that feels satisfying and a little bit surprising. The film doesn't just deliver a genre experience. It reshapes it in ways that make you rethink what a thriller can be. Miss Meadows sneaks in social and cultural commentary in a way that feels both subtle and thought-provoking, weaving these themes into the story so naturally you might not even notice at first, until you start to unpack what's really going on beneath the surface. The film uses its premise and characters to explore ideas about morality, justice, and the fine line between order and chaos in society, without ever coming across as preachy or heavy-handed. One of the standout threads running through the film is its exploration of vigilantism and the question of what happens when individuals take the law into their own hands. Miss Meadows, with her strict personal code and unyielding sense of justice, becomes a symbol of this complex debate. The film doesn't simply paint vigilantism as heroic or villainous. Instead, it invites the audience to wrestle with the consequences of such actions. It's like the story is asking, is justice ever truly served when it bypasses the system? And who gets to decide what's right or wrong? This reflects ongoing cultural conversations about law, order, and morality that resonate well beyond the screen. There's also a subtle commentary on the idea of the ideal citizen and societal expectations, especially around gender roles and behavior. Miss Meadows' character presents a polished, almost stereotypical image of a perfect, nurturing schoolteacher. Orderly, polite, caring, but beneath that surface lies a much more complicated and darker persona. This duality speaks to the pressures many face to conform to societal ideals while hiding struggles or truths that don't fit neatly into those boxes. The film cleverly uses this to comment on how society often values appearances over authenticity, and how that can create tension and even violence beneath the calm facade. The setting, a quiet suburban town with its pristine streets and polite community, acts as a microcosm for larger social dynamics. The film uses this familiar environment to highlight how danger and moral ambiguity can lurk beneath everyday life, challenging the viewer to question the myths of safety and perfection often associated with such places. It's a reminder that no community is immune to complexity, and that the neat boundaries we draw between good and evil can be dangerously simplistic. What makes the film's social and cultural commentary particularly effective is how it handles these themes with nuance. It doesn't lecture or force messages but lets the story and characters embody these questions organically. Sensitive topics like justice, violence, and social conformity are explored through the plot and character decisions rather than explicit exposition, which makes the commentary feel lived in and real rather than artificial. The film also touches on the psychological impact of trauma and repression, adding another layer to its cultural observations. Miss Meadows' carefully controlled exterior hints at deeper wounds and unresolved pain, reflecting broader conversations about mental health and the masks people wear to navigate the world. This adds emotional depth to the commentary, reminding us that social issues are always intertwined with personal stories. In short, Miss Meadows offers a quietly sharp take on contemporary issues by wrapping them in an engaging story that feels intimate and relatable. The film invites viewers to think about justice, identity, and societal expectations without ever stepping out of its narrative flow, making its social and cultural commentary both effective and entertaining. It's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling statements come not from loud declarations but from the subtle interplay of character, setting, and story. Miss Meadows has this curious way of sneaking under your skin, grabbing your attention not just with its story but by tugging at your emotions in unexpected ways. It's not the kind of film that hits you over the head with big emotional moments or dramatic explosions of feeling. Instead, it builds its impact quietly, making you feel things in a slow-burning, cumulative way that sticks with you long after the credits roll. Right from the start, there's an emotional undercurrent that pulls you in. You find yourself rooting for Miss Meadows, with her sweet demeanor and polished manners, wanting her to succeed in her mission, even as the story slowly peels back the layers to reveal a darker, more complicated side. That mix of empathy and unease creates an emotional cocktail that keeps you hooked, constantly shifting between admiration and suspicion. It's a roller coaster of feelings that doesn't let you settle into any one spot for too long. The film has a knack for surprising you emotionally. Moments that seem innocent or light-hearted at first glance can suddenly twist into something tense or haunting. The juxtaposition of warmth and darkness creates shocks. Not the kind that jump out with loud noise, but the kind that make you catch your breath because the mood shifts so unexpectedly. These subtle jolts invite you to lean in, to pay attention, and to rethink what you thought you knew about the characters and their world. Laughter sneaks in through dry, understated humor, especially in the interactions between Miss Meadows and the people around her. This humor feels natural and earned, providing relief from the tension without undermining the story's seriousness. It makes the characters feel more real and relatable, which deepens your emotional investment. You might chuckle at a clever line or a quietly ironic moment, then suddenly find yourself on edge again as the stakes rise. There are also quiet, tender moments that evoke a gentle sadness or longing. Scenes where Miss Meadows shows vulnerability or reflects on her own loneliness invite empathy and give the film emotional texture beyond the thriller elements. These moments add layers to the character and make her journey feel more personal and affecting. What's really interesting is how the film encourages reflection and discussion. It raises questions about morality, justice, and identity without handing you easy answers, so you're left thinking long after watching. Viewers might find themselves debating Miss Meadows' choices, the ethics of vigilantism, or the ways society pressures people to hide their true selves. This kind of engagement makes the film feel alive and meaningful, sparking conversations that go beyond the screen. The movie also has a certain replay value because of its layered storytelling and subtle details. On a first watch, you might focus on the surface plot and characters, but on repeat viewings, you pick up on nuances in dialogue, symbolism in the visuals, and hints about the characters' motivations that you missed before. This depth invites you to come back, explore, and discover something new each time. In essence, Miss Meadows doesn't just tell a story. It creates an emotional experience that unfolds gradually, blending warmth, tension, humor, and sadness in a way that keeps you engaged, thinking and feeling. It's a film that quietly sneaks into your mind and heart, making you want to talk about it, ponder it, and maybe even watch it again to catch all the little things that make it special. When you line up Miss Meadows alongside other films in the psychological thriller and dark drama genres, it manages to carve out its own quirky little niche that's both familiar and fresh. It shares some DNA with movies like The Brave One or The Equalizer, stories about seemingly ordinary people who take justice into their own hands, but it's got a distinctive twist that sets it apart from the typical vigilante tale. Instead of gritty urban chaos or explosive action, Miss Meadows opts for a quieter, more stylized atmosphere, focusing on the odd blend of sweetness and menace embodied by its lead character. Compared to classic thrillers where the protagonist's darker side often erupts in loud, overt violence, this film's restrained approach feels more like a slow-burning fable or modern fairy tale. It's less about the spectacle and more about the psychological texture. This gives it a unique flavor when placed next to high-octane thrillers. It's as if it whispers its secrets while others shout. That contrast makes Miss Meadows stand out, especially for viewers who appreciate character-driven tension over non-stop action. If you're familiar with director Karen Leigh Hopkins' style, this movie fits neatly into her knack for blending mood and character study, but it also expands on her earlier work by diving deeper into moral ambiguity and dark humor. The way she balances the surreal charm of Miss Meadows' world with moments of real emotional weight is a strong signature here. Compared to some of her past projects, this film feels more polished and confident in mixing genres and tones, showing growth in her storytelling chops. In the broader landscape of films featuring female protagonists who defy norms, Miss Meadows holds its own by presenting a character who isn't just tough or troubled but complex in a way that challenges simple categorization. Unlike more straightforward revenge thrillers, this one gives you a protagonist who feels like a puzzle, inviting viewers to question her motives and morality rather than just cheer her on. That makes it a bit like Gone Girl or Black Swan, where the main character's psychological layers are central to the experience. While it doesn't dive into high-budget spectacle or groundbreaking visual effects like some bigger thrillers, Miss Meadows leans heavily into mood, atmosphere, and performance. This approach may remind you of indie thrillers like Blue Ruin or Cold in July, where tension is built through character interaction and atmosphere rather than flashy set pieces. In that sense, it's a film that rewards patience and attention, offering a slow reveal rather than instant gratification. Overall, Miss Meadows sits comfortably among its genre peers by blending familiar elements: vigilante justice, psychological complexity, moral ambiguity, with a fresh, offbeat tone and a unique protagonist who's equal parts charming and chilling. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel but rather to give it a fresh coat of paint, resulting in a film that feels both recognizable and refreshingly different. Whether you're a fan of classic thrillers or looking for something a little more nuanced, Miss Meadows offers a distinct voice that lingers long after you've watched it. Miss Meadows is like a treasure chest packed with symbolism and metaphors that invite you to dig a little deeper beyond the surface story. The film sprinkles visual cues and recurring motifs throughout that aren't just decorative. They work hard to enrich the themes and give the story a layer of mystery and meaning that rewards close attention. Take the character of Miss Meadows herself. She's almost a walking metaphor for duality. On one hand, she's the picture of innocence and order, the perfect schoolteacher with her neat outfits, polished manners and calm demeanor. But beneath that facade lies a vigilant force of justice, blurring the lines between protector and avenger. This duality plays out visually too. Her appearance often contrasts with the darker actions she takes, symbolizing the clash between societal expectations and hidden truths. She's both the guardian angel and the dark avenger, a living metaphor for the thin line between good and evil. The film's use of color is another subtle but powerful tool. Soft pastels and clean whites dominate scenes with Miss Meadows, suggesting purity and calm, yet these colors often sit uneasily beside shadowy, more ominous settings or moments of violence. This contrast in palette reflects the tension between outward appearances and inner realities, reinforcing the idea that things are rarely as simple as they seem. The pastel world almost feels like a mask, hiding the complex and sometimes violent undercurrents. Recurring imagery of clocks and time also plays a big symbolic role. Throughout the film, there are moments where time seems to be either frozen or running out, suggesting themes of control, fate, and the inevitability of consequences. The ticking clock is a metaphor for the protagonist's internal struggle with her own sense of justice. How long can she maintain control before her darker impulses take over? Time, in this sense, becomes a pressure cooker, ramping up the tension and emphasizing that every choice carries weight. The school setting itself functions as a metaphor for innocence and social order, but the disruptions that occur within it suggest how fragile that order really is. Classrooms, playgrounds, and hallways, places typically associated with learning and growth, take on a more unsettling tone as the story progresses, highlighting how even the most controlled environments can harbor danger and moral complexity. Another clever metaphor woven into the film is the idea of masks and performance. Miss Meadows is constantly performing the role of the perfect teacher, the good citizen, the calm protector. This idea of wearing masks goes beyond just the protagonist. It reflects the broader social commentary about how people present themselves in society, hiding true emotions or intentions behind carefully crafted facades. This motif encourages viewers to think about authenticity and the hidden selves everyone carries. The film also hints at fairy tale and fable-like symbolism, with Miss Meadows resembling a modern-day Cinderella or Little Red Riding Hood, figures who navigate dangerous worlds while maintaining an air of innocence. This framing adds a mythic quality to the story, turning it into more than just a thriller but a cautionary tale about morality and identity. Overall, these layers of symbolism and metaphor make Miss Meadows feel like a rich puzzle box. Each visual cue or motif isn't just for show but deepens the narrative, inviting viewers to explore the film on multiple levels. The story becomes not just about what happens but what it means, turning a simple plot into a meditation on justice, identity, and the masks we all wear. It's like a whispered secret that keeps pulling you back in, asking, "What else don't you see yet?" Miss Meadows isn't part of a larger franchise or cinematic universe, which actually works in its favor because it lets the story breathe on its own without the pressure of fitting into a bigger puzzle. In a world where so many films are tied to sequels, prequels, or expansive series, Miss Meadows feels like a standalone gem, a self-contained story with a clear beginning, middle, and end that invites viewers to focus entirely on its unique tone and themes without wondering about what's coming next. This independence gives it a rare kind of freedom to explore its characters and moral questions without the baggage of continuity or fan expectations. Now, if we think about it in terms of historical context, Miss Meadows isn't trying to recreate a specific time period or real-life events, but it does tap into contemporary cultural moods and social dynamics that feel very relevant. The film's setting, a small, orderly town with an undercurrent of tension, captures a snapshot of modern suburban life, where appearances are meticulously maintained but complex, sometimes dark realities simmer just beneath the surface. In this way, it acts like a mirror reflecting current societal anxieties about justice, safety, and personal identity. The film's portrayal of vigilantism and moral ambiguity fits into a larger historical tradition of American cinema, exploring the lone hero or anti-hero taking justice into their own hands. This theme has roots going back to westerns and classic noir films, but Miss Meadows updates it with a modern sensibility and a distinctly female perspective. It's as if the movie acknowledges its cinematic ancestors while also carving out a fresh space for stories about women who don't fit traditional roles of either victim or heroine. By not being tied down to a franchise or strict historical backdrop, Miss Meadows feels like a contemporary parable, a moral tale tailored for today's audience. Its story reflects ongoing debates about law, order, and individual responsibility in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. The film captures a moment in cultural history where people are questioning authority and grappling with complex social issues, but it does so through a very personal, intimate lens rather than a broad historical sweep. So, while Miss Meadows isn't building a saga or reenacting history, it situates itself firmly within the landscape of modern storytelling that blends familiar genre elements with fresh perspectives. It stands as a snapshot of current cultural concerns, wrapped in a stylish, suspenseful package that's both timeless and of its moment. This balance makes it feel like a small but significant chapter in the ongoing conversation about justice, identity, and what it means to protect the world around us. Miss Meadows operated on a modest budget, especially when you compare it to the blockbuster extravaganzas that flood theaters these days. This lean budget meant the filmmakers had to be smart and creative with how they used their resources, focusing more on atmosphere, character, and story rather than flashy special effects or elaborate set pieces. The production quality punches above its weight, proving that you don't need a massive financial arsenal to craft a visually appealing and emotionally engaging film. The cinematography, set design, and overall aesthetic have a polished, almost indie charm that feels intentional rather than limited by budget constraints. When it comes to box office, Miss Meadows didn't exactly set the world on fire with massive ticket sales. It flew under the radar compared to bigger releases, finding a smaller, more niche audience rather than mainstream blockbuster crowds. This wasn't necessarily a surprise given the film's genre blend and its quiet, character-driven nature, which can be a tougher sell in theaters packed with high-octane action and franchise sequels. But despite not topping charts, it found appreciation among viewers who stumbled upon it, building a sort of cult following over time. Marketing played an interesting role in the film's financial journey. With limited advertising muscle, Miss Meadows relied heavily on word of mouth and targeted promotions aimed at thriller and indie film enthusiasts. This grassroots approach meant it didn't get the huge promotional blitz that big studio films enjoy, which both helped keep costs down and limited its reach. Yet, for those who caught the trailers or read about it online, the intriguing premise and unique tone created curiosity that translated into steady, if not spectacular, interest. Audience reception also had its influence. Viewers who connected with the film's offbeat vibe and complex lead character tended to spread the word, especially through online reviews and social media chatter. However, because it doesn't fit neatly into a single genre box and avoids typical thriller tropes, it sometimes divided opinions, which can affect box office momentum. The film's subtlety and pacing weren't for everyone, so while it garnered praise for its uniqueness, it didn't always draw the crowds that prefer more conventional thrills. In the end, Miss Meadows stands as an example of a film that made the most of its budget, delivering quality storytelling and production values without the need for blockbuster spending. Its financial story is one of steady, modest success rather than runaway hits, showing that sometimes the real victory lies in crafting something memorable and well-made within constraints, even if it doesn't break box office records. It's a reminder that good films come in all sizes, and that a smaller budget can still produce a big impact in the right hands. If you're ready to dive into the world of Miss Meadows, you've got a few solid options to catch this intriguing film and really soak up its unique vibe. Since it's not one of those blockbuster releases dominating every multiplex, you might not find it in your local theater right now, but don't worry, the streaming and digital world has you covered. The film has made its way to popular streaming platforms and digital rental services, making it pretty accessible for viewers who love to watch from the comfort of their own space. For the fullest experience, watching Miss Meadows on a good-sized screen with decent sound really helps. The film's mood and atmosphere thrive when you can catch the subtle details, the nuanced performances, the carefully crafted visuals, and the quiet tension that builds up in key scenes. So whether that's your living room TV, a high-quality laptop, or even a projector setup for an at-home movie night, having good picture and sound quality elevates the whole experience. Digital rental platforms like Amazon Prime Video, iTunes, Google Play Movies, and Vudu often have Miss Meadows available for rent or purchase, so you can pick your favorite service and enjoy it whenever you want without worrying about showtimes. This flexibility is great for those spontaneous movie nights when you're in the mood for something different but don't want to leave the house. Plus, owning a digital copy means you can revisit Miss Meadows' world as many times as you like, catching those little details and layers you might miss on the first watch. If you prefer streaming subscription services, it's worth checking platforms like Hulu or Netflix, as the film sometimes appears there depending on licensing deals and region. These services can be a goldmine for discovering hidden gems like Miss Meadows, especially if you enjoy browsing through their thriller or drama categories. Just keep an eye out for availability because streaming libraries often change, so the film might pop in and out over time. For cinephiles who really want to immerse themselves, pairing the film with a cozy, distraction-free environment helps a ton. Dim the lights, grab some popcorn, and settle in for a psychological journey that doesn't demand fast-paced action but rewards patience and attention to atmosphere and character. This movie's charm is in its subtle tension and the layers beneath the surface, so giving it your full focus makes the viewing all the more satisfying. So, whether you prefer the flexibility of streaming, the ownership of digital purchase, or the occasional rental for a night in, Miss Meadows is available in ways that suit your style. Just pick your favorite screen, get comfy, and prepare to step into a story that's quietly compelling, a bit mysterious, and totally worth the watch.